After they installed our system, within a year and a half, they were able to pay back the entire cost of the solar and battery storage microgrid just from the savings they were achieving, but the savings that they made from not buying diesel generator every month. Within a year and a half, they paid off the entire capex, and this system will still last for another 10 plus years. So after a year and a half, power is.
Today, I had a conversation with Olugbenga Ajala, founder and CEO of a Techstars company called Ashipa Electric. Ashipa Electric provides microgrid solar solutions in Nigeria so that more people can have access to energy and at a lower price point as well. We talk about microgrid implementation challenges, community power access, and energy cost reduction. This is Earth ABC featuring Olugbenga Ajala. All right, Olu. Thanks for being here. We love a microgrid guest, and so looking forward to our conversation today.
Likewise, look forward to it.
All right, so helping companies reduce energy costs and giving more people the energy they need. I love it. That's my understanding of what Ashipa Electric is doing. I'd love to hear your best elevator pitch and how you're doing that.
Well, we build microgrids, solar storage, and backup generator. And the reason why we do this, and particularly in Nigeria, is because in Nigeria, population of 230 million people, 40% of them have no access to grid electricity, while 60% have access. The 60% that have access to grid electricity probably get power less than 50% of the time. So everybody has to depend on diesel or backup generator if they can afford it in order to get power. And this is expensive. The diesel is expensive. It's very noisy. It's air polluting and also equipment damaging. So Ashipa Electric comes in with solar and battery storage to help them reduce the cost of power, to clean the source of power, and to also ensure that there's no noise, while also providing reliable and resilient power solution for businesses and homeowners.
And when you say that these like diesel generators make a lot of noise, like how loud are we talking?
Well, there's going to be a major humming that will require you to have to increase the volume of your TV whenever you're watching TV. But it's just very noisy. Just imagine running your lawnmower.
That loud?
Louder than that.
Wow. Yeah, I can't imagine being able to take a nap during the day if that thing is on.
And some people run it all day.
Yikes. I know one other major concern with microgrids is like the high upfront costs due to like investments in like equipment, as well as the ROI kind of being uncertain. How are you and Ashipa Electric navigating that to secure projects with both homeowners and then businesses?
Speaking of ROI, it depends on where you are. For example, I was a part of a project in Birmingham, Alabama, where we deployed a microgrid. And this microgrid was for an entire community. The objective was to demonstrate the viability or the technical viability of microgrids to isolate an entire community in the case of inclement weather. We demonstrated it, but because the cost of power was low in Birmingham at the time, it was not economically viable. So that would be the question about that ROI. But that's because it was in Birmingham. If that same project was in California, it would be economically viable. But then in Nigeria, where people have to use diesel or gasoline generator, and they're spending 4 times or more the cost of electricity here in the US because they have to augment with diesel generator, then installing solar battery storage is definitely economically viable because it reduces the overall cost of power by at least 40 to 60%.
That's enough to convince me to switch over, if I'm going to be honest.
Absolutely, without grants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the economic viability in a place like Nigeria, it's ever so clear. How does Ashipa Electric then ensure like both the reliability and resilience of the microgrids itself?
The most important thing is installing the right equipment and ensuring that the system is sized specific to the load. So let's say we are working with agro processing facility, which we actually did. We installed the system in 2022. This farmer, they farm vegetables, and prior to reaching out to us, they ran their entire farm on diesel generator. And this diesel generator, it was very high. That's why they reached out to us. After it was so high that after they installed our system, which is the upfront cost is expensive. After they installed our system, within a year and a half, they were able to pay back the entire cost of the solar and battery storage microgrid just from the savings they were achieving, but the savings that they made from not buying diesel generator every month. Within a year and a half, they paid off the entire capex, and this system will still last for another 10 plus years. So after a year and a half, power is free for them,
Right.
just because they switched from diesel generator to microgrid.
Gotcha. So, would love to hear more about like the business model of Ashipa Electric, more specifically for like deploying these microgrid solutions. Is there like a portion where it's like an upfront charge and then you have like an installment of payments, or is there something else in which you're kind of charging your clients?
Our business model includes those two that you mentioned, plus more. We do upfront charge for perhaps 70% of the cost. Then we build, and then when we're done, we'll get the balance. And then we can also stagger it over 6 months to a 12 months period. But the one that we prefer the most is where we have a power purchase agreement. Power purchase agreement simply means that we have, well, it simply means we will invest the funds upfront to build a generation asset, and then we have an agreement with the customer, the client, to pay for the amount of energy consumed over a certain period. That could be 10 years, the term could be 10 years, 15 years to 20 years. And that is the third approach, the third business model.
Gotcha. And you talked about kind of like this one client in like the agriculture space that found a lot of use from the cost savings like a year and a half into it. Would love to hear more about other success stories where you guys significantly improved energy access for maybe like a community of people.
So our unique approach is to leverage anchor-based mini-grid projects. So by anchor-based, we go into these communities that have economic activity, a lot of economic activity going on. And if they don't, at least there's a major client there, a bankable client. In the case of some of the projects we deployed in Nigeria, we look at telecom towers. They already operate in these communities. They have many of them across the country, and they already use diesel generator primarily. So they already have high cost of power. If they're operating effectively with high cost of power, then we believe if we reduce their cost of power, they will operate more profitably. But for us, they're not just a client. They are securing the revenue for our project, or at least a portion of the revenue for our projects. And beyond them, we're now providing power to the immediate community there. So that's our anchor-based community mini-grid model. And then by deploy we've done 2 projects like that in Nigeria so far, where we help the anchor clients reduce their cost of power by 60%, and then we provide power to the rest of the community.
Gotcha. And for these communities where there's high economic activity and they have a lot of like cost for the power, how much, I guess, savings have you seen like once they install like your microgrid solutions in 1 year and 3 years?
So the example is this: the anchor clients, they're saving 60% on a monthly basis on their cost of energy. There's a project that we deployed close to the capital, Abuja, in Nigeria, where the project was dedicated to commercial activities in the community, and there were small processing facilities that they were operating, operating on diesel generator. As a result, they didn't operate as often as they should. But once we deployed the microgrid in that community, they saw their cost of power reduced by at least 30%. And then their operation was more, they opened their shop more often, they processed more goods because their cost of operation went down.
Gotcha. And one thing that a lot of people know is that if the load on the power grid is pretty significant, more so than the capacity, the grid kind of blows out. Is that like a worry with like microgrid solutions?
Could you repeat that question?
Yeah. So like when the load on like the power grid is greater than the capacity for the power grid itself, the power grid kind of blows out, and like the power goes out for the people that are trying to access that power. Is that a concern for microgrid solutions too?
That will be a concern. That is why it's very important to do a thorough load survey to understand what the demand is in the community and then design the microgrid accordingly. Beautiful thing about microgrid is it's scalable. So as the load continues to grow, once you start reaching a particular threshold, there is opportunity for the microgrid to expand in order to cover the new load and to anticipate load over time and continue to upgrade the size of the system to be able to serve the load.
And then in a place like Nigeria, where are you installing these microgrid solutions?
We've installed projects in the North Central, in the southwestern part of the country, in the south part of the country. That's Bayelsa, southwest around Ogun State. But in our pipeline of projects, we have projects all over the country.
How about in terms of like the site in which the microgrids are being installed at? Like, are they on like rooftops, in like rural areas? Maybe like you found some clever way to embed it into some like buildings. Like, what does that look like?
So we have done several projects. We've done smaller projects that are rooftop for commercial clients, but the mini grid that we're deploying are primarily in off-grid communities. So they're land-based and ground-mounted. So they're off-grid communities, they're peri-urban communities, and the pipeline that we have are going to mostly be off-grid and peri-urban communities.
Gotcha. And so I imagine if it's if the microgrid solutions are put on land and stuff, you have to get like approval from like the community members, maybe like the local government. Who do you typically work with in terms of making sure that legally it works out?
Oh yes, there's already the Nigerian Electric, well, the NERC, Nigerian Electric Regulatory Commission, has the process laid out. And of recent, they've actually devolved the responsibility to each state to come up with their own processes for interconnection and just managing the grid. But prior to that, there's already policies in place to regulate how different power generators come in and interact with the grid. Now, prior to 2016, 2017, there was a lot more emphasis on large-scale centralized power generation and then large transmission to get power down to then distribution lines with thousands of miles to get power to customers. But then between 2016 and 2017, there were a lot of policies that came in between NERC and the Nigeria's Rural Electrification Agency to come together and figure out how to power the rural communities. Because like I said, 40% of the population were not connected to the national grid. So the centralized power generation approach could not work because the transmission or distribution line did not get to some of those edge of the grid, or some of those rural or peri-urban communities. So Rural Electrification Agency, along with NERC, along with many other entities, came together and figured out how to incentivize private sector participation in developing smaller scale projects in rural communities to power those communities and perhaps eventually interconnect with the grid. So those policies are what the mini grid developers are operating with. So Each one of them will need to have a permit in order to be able to build and also provide power for the communities that they will serve. They have to have commercial agreements with the community. They have to have exclusivity agreements with the community. And then they also have to ensure that the systems that they install meet the Rural Electrification Agency standards and also the meet NEMSA and other standards within the Nigerian system to ensure that the integrity of those systems are well assessed.
Gotcha. So a lot of checks seem to be included in this process.
Lots of checks.
What's the timeline looking like to go from, okay, I've identified a potential community partner up until the time it takes to start implementation all the way until it's up and live?
So that could be about 3 months. It could be less. It really is. Once that is identified and the mode of funding the project is already identified, the process to apply for all of those at a minimum for the environmental assessments, that could be 3 weeks to a month. But then a lot of other things can be done simultaneously in order to get everything prepared such that and then equipment, depending on where the equipment is being sourced, it'll take some of them may take 3 months to get there. Some can be just 1 month. So planning all of those at the same time in order to get the equipment on site, get all the approvals in place, and then perhaps the last month you can begin construction. You can expect some delays during construction as well. So you might be able to get it done in a month or get it done in 3 months.
Gotcha. And I really like how you guys are able to help these rural communities that are detached from like the overall power grid. I don't want to project onto you, but for me, like the vision is that all of these like rural communities can then have access to like their own power. But I'd love to hear from one of the co-founders himself. What's the company's long-term vision for like a decentralized energy future?
So we are working on decentralized energy future, but eventually we do want, in addition to, we want distributed energy to be a part of the larger grid. So our outlook is we're deploying distributed right now because it's important to achieve universal electrification. But eventually, we want those grids to be able to support industrialization, rapid industrialization. So therefore, those grids have to become bigger. And then the bigger those grids become, the more local communities that are close to each other, the more those grids can be meshed in order to form larger grids. Or with existing grid in peri-urban communities, we deploy in those areas too. The goal is to continue to ensure that those grids are, because the most important thing in any community is to have 24/7 power. You have solar, you have battery storage, you have backup gas or backup diesel generator, but it's still important to have a larger grid connected in those areas. And our long-term outlook, in immediate term, deploy as many mini grids to ensure that all communities are connected to the tune of how much we can deploy, of course. And then at a later time, we want to start deploying larger grids.
Gotcha. And to speak on behalf of like your current capacity, I remember in our prior conversation, you said you have a huge team in Southern and East Africa with most of your team in Nigeria. With a large team size, I imagine the company is financially healthy. If you can you provide—
I wouldn't say huge team, but go
okay.
ahead.
Can you provide like details on the company's like current revenue, the growth rate, and profitability metrics, if you're able to share?
So I can't share all of that.
Okay.
I'll say that we have a team. Our team is mostly in Nigeria. We're at least 20. And then we have a few people in Southern and East Africa because those are early development in those regions. And with our pipeline of projects, we're expecting significant ramp up in our operation. But as far as the revenue, the metrics, I'll try to hold that up for now.
For sure. I mean, we can kind of imagine what it's like if you have like a team of 20 plus, you're growing at an exponential rate. That's all music to your ears, music to mine, and hopefully to other investors. We'd love to also hear like what opportunities exist for investors in the clean energy space. Like what advice you have for entrepreneurs looking to enter the sector.
What I would advise entrepreneurs looking at is to understand the core reason why they're getting into the space. What is the objective? For Ashipa Electric, the reason why we came into this market and why we picked Nigeria first. For me personally, I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria, and I saw firsthand what it meant to have limited access to electricity. And at that point, I made a conscious decision that I wanted to be part of the solution. Clean energy was not even in the picture then, because then I was just trying to figure out how can these problems be solved. Studied electrical engineering, and then worked in the oil and gas industry, focused on power generation, then worked in electric utility, focused on renewables and the likes. And for some reason, the cost of solar came down significantly, about 99.5% over the past 50 years. And then battery storage came down about 97%. Those are the things that came together to make solar and battery storage the ideal solution for the communities, for the regions that we're looking at this point, right? So one has to understand. So it's not primarily because there's climate change and we transition into clean energy. It's in addition to that, is more of economic, stimulating economic activity, economic development. Those are part of the reasons why we're looking at it. So it is important for new entrepreneurs to understand the key drivers of their operation. Is it climate change? Is it economic development? Are there other things to be considered? Understanding that will help drive the efficiency, or will actually determine the potential for success in the market.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Trying to identify any tailwinds that your venture can ride along, and for yours especially, like you have like a personal connection, like being born and raised in Nigeria, seeing the energy situation firsthand, and then also being witness along with every single one of us, the technological advancement of these batteries, these solar panels, and it's honestly great to see. And for us to like close, what do you think is the most compelling reason for investors to bet on Ashipa Electric?
So first, I was actually born in Dallas, but
Dallas.
grew up in Lagos, Nigeria. The most compelling reason to bet on Ashipa Electric is that Ashipa Electric has found a way to bring power to the last 7% of the global community in a way that is sustainable. We are leveraging anchor-based mini-grid development to come into the communities, identify a strong anchor client to bring in power to the community, and then the balance of the power from our generation assets will provide power to the immediate community. So we're not just providing power just to provide access, but we're bringing power to stimulate economic development, which will eventually sustain the power for the long haul. And our projects will deliver competitive return on investment while also doing good in the communities in which we provide power.
And that major good is decentralized energy for many different communities, many different areas, many different businesses as well. So really appreciate you taking the time, Olu, for us to learn more about Ashipa Electric, more about yourself too. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this interview, follow along on Earth ABC's LinkedIn to stay connected and never miss what's going on in climate tech. If you'd like to reach out or you're interested in coming on as a guest, feel free to connect with me, Sean Pack, on LinkedIn. We're always looking for inspiring ventures and founders in the climate space to feature on the show. Hope you enjoyed. Until next time.